to go with it because that's how we do on the Mattriarchy. We just talk. That's how it works out. So those of you guys who are tuned in or watching the replay, welcome to another Thursday, another Mattriarchy. And I am here with another Matt.
How you doing?
And with the unnamed, unknown number one Marmaduke fan.
What are you talking about? That's literally what's on my birth certificate.
Well, when you have when number one Marmaduke fan gives birth to you, I suppose that makes sense.
Oh no, Dad was number one Marmaduke. You gotta get this right. My dad's number one Marmadad. Mom's number one Marmaduke.
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 Beautiful.
Yeah. That's a deep cut, though. I'd like to point out, to give myself a little back clap for that. You haven't mentioned it in a while. So
anyway, so I also have read these comics, so I'm super stoked about it.
Yeah, well, one of the things is Matt was talking before we went live. He was lamenting how when you come onto the Mattriarchy, you get exactly this much hint as to what's really going on, and I like to keep people on their toes, sort of, and the big part of that comes down to you get unexpected things that way. So a couple weeks ago, I don't know if you saw, I had a huge, just a full house, and we had Brian Ball, Thrag's team, and we had
yeah, that was awesome.
That was a great show. But Brian was just like he saw through me instantly. I couldn't catch him on anything. It was just like, I'm sorry, what? That's a verboten topic. We don't discuss this.
Yeah, Brian's a smart cookie.
Oh man, yeah, he's fun. We talked for about a half an hour after everyone else left about stuff. So
cool.
Yeah, he's a great guy. I really am anxious to get him back one of these days.
Yeah.
Wasn't he going to like fund something if he made a stretch goal on his campaign Rags Take the Money and Run, where he wasn't promising any perks at all?
Yeah, and actually, he one of the fun things about that is that he wasn't funding any perks, but everybody who ordered the wrong shirt actually received the wrong shirt. You had T-shirts printed up that said "Brian Ball took my money." He had them all made in like a child's medium or something and sent out.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant.
I know. It's hilarious. I still laugh deeply about all of that. But yeah, and I think anything that was profit off of, like, because there were a few like little tchotchkes and stuff that did get sent out, but I think he ended up donating a bunch of it to like Toys for Tots or something. But I mean, accountant or anything, but there was something like that. So, but yeah, it was a fun gag for sure. I had a big kick out of that. Yeah. So, if I had been thinking, Matt, oh my goodness, earlier this week, of course, Kyrie came into my mailbox. I read it, but I left it upstairs like a moron.
I got mine.
So I can't even bring it out, So that would be the thing. Well, that's the thing though. The thing though, Marm, is, are you ready for face reveal?
Well, I was also wondering if I had like a digital book. Okay, I'm saving the. Oh, I hear an echo. I'm saving my face reveal for a stretch goal.
Nice.
Am I the only
one? $1 million on face reveal.
Am I the only one that's getting a lot of feedback loop? I think.
Yeah, I heard that too.
I am not, but maybe it's me.
I think it might be you, Rhys. I'm sorry. It's your show. You do your show.
Well, no, that's the thing is, and I there are some people that are here that are watching. If they want to let me know if what's going on, if it is for mine, but I do have a pair of headphones I can pop in, but they're terrible. And usually my computer will switch. It's supposed to be smart enough to switch off the microphone when the speakers are going.
Mm-hmm.
But it might not be working right because I had a ton of updates today. Oh my goodness. I sat down today. This is a total whining moment, but I sat down today. I had 2 hours between appointments and I was out of town, and I was going to try to get some work done, and I was going to try to sneak in a little coloring time too. And because I've always got something going in, right? And so I'm like, okay, this is great. And I sit down at a place to work on the thing, and like none of my tools are operating right on my computer. And sure enough, I have to do updates, and it ends up taking 45 minutes to shut down and restart my computer.
Oh, bad sign.
So I just sat there and listened to John Delarose talk while I was waiting on my computer to make anything useful. Oh man, it was obnoxious.
I got a bit of that stream. It's nice to hear a comics heavy live stream. Sorry,
I think it is coming over your mic.
Okay, well,
Matt R.
Yeah.
I will have to go ahead. Hang on a second.
Sorry, buddy.
No, it's cool. It's cool. I will mute myself, and then you can say what you were going to say. That'll work for now.
No, it's just nice. Like I'm kind of drifting into trying to find different zones of information. I have a day job where I can wear headphones for a lot of the day, and it's and I want information heavy live streams. That's what I dig. How are these different campaigns going? What are people thinking about storytelling? How's fulfillment? What are the fans interested in 2020? That's kind of what I want to hear about. So it's nice. There's a lot of people doing that. A lot of people, honestly, it's been a lot of people that I haven't really tried until recently. I didn't give them much of a chance, I suppose. And I'm glad I am now, because it's nice. It's nice to find that and get that. Yeah.
How happy would you say you are with like the printer you got? Like, I was happy with the print quality, but like, I know you had some delays. Would you like recommend your printer to other creators?
Well, okay, so I have experience printing exactly one book, so it's hard. I think they did a very good job, but the butt is on me. We had to do a test print of just I forgot what they call it, but they print out loose sheets of every page. We had to do that twice, and apparently that's a big deal when you get that redone. I thought it's like, oh, just print me out a copy, you mail it my way, I'm gonna check it out. Everything's too dark. Let me, I'll update the levels. I'll adjust everything. I'll even take out some of the shadows on some pages, but send me another copy because it's too dark. Apparently, you should probably work all those things out. It's best to just have, a one step, just, be so confident by the time you sent them the PDF, the print files the first time around, that you're not asking for take twos on anything. But I think that's common. I think they're expecting high volume output from, magazines and, just real big orders, and they really need to just keep things going, and they can't kind of fiddle with us little, indie creators too much. They're expecting us to act like industrial clients. So that's the one thing that I did learn, is that I really need to, I guess, like, print out a lot of test pages on my own, like, I don't know how, like, find something that's equivalent to the paper that I need and then try that out. Go to Kinko's or something, I guess, and just pay for that myself so that I know approximately what to expect. Just stuff like that,
Well, one of the things, and we've never done color before. This, though, that we're working on right now, which is Sola Voce. We've actually retitled for various reasons, but we've which I can get into some other time. But with it, it's the first time we've done color printing, other than just covers. And one of the things that we had actually looked into is that because when we do everything on a computer, right, we have a light shining through it, and that throws off the brightness of what actually gets sent to the printer. advised is to turn your screen down to about 60% of its brightness. The exterior light from what it is. And I don't know if that would help in the future for you.
Dig that.
Yeah, that's a little trick that Barry was keyed in on, and so we're hoping on that. But I mean, we've always done black and white before, and so that's never really been a huge problem for us.
In Marm, are you thinking black and white, or what are you thinking?
What I'm thinking for now is I'm considering like a homebrew release just to kind of like get it in the hands of some people. And I'm considering submitting to a bigger publisher like Alterna or maybe Antarctic or Wicked. Once I've got about six issues, I kind of want 6 issues in the bag because I work slowly, so I kind of want there to be a chunk that can be put out there without like immediate pressure to like, oh man, I got to get it done this month, right? So I'll probably be doing it like in story arc chunks, and once the story arc chunk is done, then I'll find a big publisher. But in the meantime, I'll probably be doing like little, printed home style things and send those out to people who are interested. Kind of like for people who like immediately want to get their hands on the first part while waiting, the long haul for the next part to come out. I really like the look of the black and white charcoal for now, so I'm sticking with black and white. I've been tempted to work in color. Maybe if like there's an important like if something is referenced to be a certain color, I might color that one object. And probably what I think I'll do is I'll kind of like use the black and white edition to build an audience, build some funds, commission some artists and posters and variant covers, and probably like do a color run as a second stab at it, kind of like how Jeff Smith published Bone black and white and then returned to it later for a color edition.
Yeah, sure. That's cool. Yeah. That's one thing I've kind of learned too is it is worth it. I think I learned this because I should have done it and I didn't. It's worth it to save up a bit for commissions and things like that ahead of time, so that unless you're just you are 100% convinced that you're going to make all the money and then some. Go ahead and commission it so that your campaign's kind of front loaded with some extra goodies first, and that's going to attract, that's going to be the dinner bell for people to come in faster, and spend more money, which is just going to allow you to do more things with the campaign.
Right. And I'm also I'm very I think a lot about cost. Like one of like going back a couple of years ago, one of the things I was talking to with a lot of people was like the cost of Marvel Comics being it hurts more when you spend $4 on a book and it's not good. So part of me is tempted to kind of like front load it with, let's make it as easy as possible for a poor person to get on board with this.
Yeah.
And then use perks as a way of saying, if you want to support me and get like these cool little collectible things, then you can pay premium. And I want them to be like worth the money still, but kind of like make it easy for someone to get on board the comic. And then bonuses are just like a building bonuses too, because to me, that's like taking advantage of like the best thing the internet gives us, which is to basically send 1 million people something for free.
Yeah, definitely.
That's one of the things too that I think is getting missed in a lot of the current discussion about it, is that $25 a pop doesn't seem like a whole lot unless you don't have $25 a pop, right? And that's things that I think that people are neglecting, is the fact that that comics they don't necessarily need to be disposable, right? You don't need to be priced so low that they're just throwaway. But if they're priced so high that they're premium, people aren't going to get into them. One of the things that you look at your big manga collections, your Shonen Jumps and whatever else, and they sell out the wazoo, but it's like 100 pages a month, so or whatever that page number is, but it's thick, So it's not like it's a 25-page book that's costing $10 or $12. You're getting 100 pages of black and white stuff out of it.
Yeah.
Of a value that's attached to that intrinsically, and I think is one thing for established creators to be able to say, no, I'm doing premium stuff But when you're trying to lure a new audience in, right? You don't have you're not Doug TenNapel when you're not Lim, right? I mean, his stuff is gotten to the point where he's producing so much and he's got such a name behind it. There are people that are like myself. I will buy anything Tim Lim makes because I have a certainty that it's going to be, amazing, and
Yeah.
But that's one of those things where, like, people that, even though I've got a crappy webcomic that I've been doing since 2006, it doesn't necessarily endure people to want to spend, $5-6 to have it shipped to them. You know what I mean? So,
well, that's another, one of the downsides to, like, myself in good conscience, I couldn't sell someone, a $20 book unless I was giving them at least 100 pages. Like it needed to be something that's equivalent to what's in the stores. And that means I have to work alone because I raised almost $7,000 and that's not enough for anything other than printing and shipping. And like a pittance to pay the guy to draw the map. And that's it. But people don't necessarily come in. Like I thought they would come in more because of the value, and maybe I got a few sales from that, but honestly I don't think value is counted for most people in page number. Unfortunately, I think it really is. It's a sense of this goes to again, I don't know what you're gonna have us talk about tonight, but it goes to a lot of the philosophy of like, what are you like? Are you buying a comic because you're supporting an entertainer that you appreciate on YouTube, which is fine, and you value their content and you like their opinions and their perspectives on things, so you figure they're probably a good storyteller and you want to give them a shot, or maybe you just want to support them, and it's nice to get some merch? Or are you really thinking about, like, hey, I'm just here for a comic, I really don't care about all the other stuff, you know what I mean? And then I really want the value to be there. Because I think if they're buying because they like you as a person and they've seen 100 hours of your live streams, then $25 for like a 24-page comic, it is not that expensive for some people. You know what I mean? It's too expensive for me because I'm just here for the comic. But if you're supporting an entertainer, I don't know. It's just like, it comes down to different philosophies, it's to each their own. But anyway,
for me, there's also go ahead.
I was going to say, just I think that's a real consideration, is where we place value in that.
Yeah.
And I think there is, I don't want to say no accounting for taste, but I think that's a definite consideration. One of the things you have to look at with that too is that I'm not a person who wants to have, I probably have 100 hours on the show after doing it for, a year. But I'm not somebody who wants to have hundreds of hours just for the sake of having it. I mean, I enjoy having the conversations. I enjoy bringing people on. I think that's a real trick, real fun thing. But I have no interest in being a YouTube celebrity. In fact, now that I have a name for my channel, I mean, I've gotten 12 more subs, and that's cool, and I appreciate it. But yeah, I have met all of my YouTube goals. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You got to cash in on those, whatever the hit meme is for Zoomers these days. Make a video that day, even if make it 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't keep track of all that stuff. I do. We were talking earlier about the Discord, and Matt McGibson, who helped start the show, built us a Discord server, and I'm on it. With a bunch of Zoomers, and it's really funny because I get along with all of the kids that post, and I don't understand anything they're talking about. But every once and again, they'll be just like, "Hey, I found this cool cartoon from the '80s," and I'm like, "This I know."
Yeah.
They talk about it like it's some sort of ancient artifact, but it's been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, Marm, what's your do you have do you already kind of have like a timetable that you're looking at for 2020 for output and all that?
And before we get into that,
yeah, right.
People watching might not know. Marm, give us the elevator pitch for Jane.
All right. Jane Smith, Wannabe Gladiator, is a passion project. I am probably most inspired by Charles Schultz had a famous quote that the way he wrote his comic strips was he didn't try to think of jokes. He just had his characters have conversations and the jokes emerged. So Jane Smith, originally Jane Smith wasn't going to be the protagonist. I was watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged, and I thought, wouldn't it be hilarious if I did a one-page comic making fun of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I had a bunch of kids, like I have a little girl playing hopscotch, and there's like this $1 billion virtual reality equipment so they can play hopscotch. And then her big brother will come in and kick the butts of all her bullies or something, right? So I had this really stupid idea, and I drew the characters. I thought, wow, I really like these characters. I don't want to do something stupid with them. And then I kind of like kept redrawing the characters, and eventually I came up with Jane Smith. And at first I was just like imagining like fight scenes without any real context. And I was always imagining like Jane Smith running away, terrified for her life, pursued by vastly superior warriors. And one of my teachers encouraged me to like never imagine things without having sketchbook paper there with you. And so I started like organizing these fight scenes into like a notebook. I had like a couple dramatic scenes I had in my mind that I knew were really good, but I didn't know like how to get there from point A to point B. And so kind of in the process of like taking all of the random doodles and sorting that into a notebook, the narrative started to emerge and her character started to emerge. And basically once I understood what her character was, everything fell into place. So it's basically the story of a very flawed young woman who suffers from like envy and a lot of self-doubt, who wants to be a virtual gladiator. This is taking place in kind of like a near future where virtual reality sports is no longer like a weird thing. It's just completely normal. It's as normal as owning a Game Boy. You can play virtual reality sports anywhere, pretty much. And her family is like a very conservative Christian kind of like middle America, down to earth family. So they don't really get that about her. But through the process, I don't know if we're still alive, but through the process of her kind of like learning how to fight, it's sort of like she learns how to be a good person and how to overcome her immaturity and her envy for her older brother.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty nice.
What was I thinking? Andrew Clavin had a great line where he'll often come up with like an idea for a story. Right, like wouldn't it be cool if blah blah blah, and I had things like that too. But then Clavin added like the story really emerges for him when he finds the character that's right for it. And so for me, like I read a lot of these shoujo manga, and I've noticed that some of them are ridiculous, but some of them have really three-dimensional, like very thoughtful female characters. So I guess my other big inspiration was From Far Away. It's my favorite manga ever. But the premise of From Far Away is, what if a weak and helpless high school girl was basically thrown into a violent fantasy world and she has absolutely no ability to defend herself, yet her attitude and kind of like basically she starts cleaning other people. She starts doing the best she can in her helpless situation, and she gradually turns into this really admirable character without ever having any like magical superpowers. So that was kind of like the other inspiration, where I think the appeal of Jane is she's a girl who really wants to fight, but she's not particularly good at fighting. Yet she can kind of like scrape it out and kind of like by the skin of her teeth or flying by the seat of her pants, she can pull a victory out.
So it makes me wonder. Oh gosh, I hope not. Well, at least there's one Matt.
Yeah, the other Mattriarchy.
So, it's okay. So the name James Smith. So we're in a time right now in our little circle where the Madi Sue just came out.
Yeah, and
we all read that and enjoyed it. And are you kind of going off of like a theme of like giving her a very everyday sort of name so that to reflect like kind of a humble origins that she can kind of build off of from and kind of subvert expectations, I suppose, by overcoming those challenges in unexpected ways, kind of thing. But you're trying to really make her, I guess, the opposite of Mary Sue. You're trying to name her something. Yeah.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of like Jane Smith was the most down to earth name I could think of. I think it might have been a placeholder name. Like I said, originally she wasn't going to be the main character. The original main character was going to be like this, fabulous anime girl in like a beautiful dress who would like ballet dance around and just, like kick all the boys' butts, right? Because I actually secretly love all that stuff. But I kind of realized, wait a second, this girl I've come up with, she's not the right character for this story. I need someone who lives on this planet. Right?
So wait, Marm, are you telling me your entire life is a lie?
So could you hear that while you were out for a second?
Oh yeah, I could hear everything. I wanted to get some headphones so that I wouldn't have to toggle myself mute on and off again, because it was interfering with my ability to free flow the conversation along. It made me feel weak and inferior. Anyway, I'm back.
So I would say you should definitely follow me for updates about Jane Smith Wannabe Gladiator. If you like action adventure, if you like heartfelt character-driven stories, like my number one goal was, yes, to have like lots of big spectacular, anime style battles, but really to have a young girl's journey from immaturity into maturity to be like the central heart and soul of the whole thing. So I cannot wait. I'm done with page 10. Just gotta letter it a little tonight, and I'm going to keep cooking. One of the things I've kind of learned by drawing it is I had the outline and the story route, but every time I sit down to do a page, because it's so much work, I want to make that page count. So I think it's forcing me to keep things clicking, right? Like we don't need to go into the side avenues and see every little side character's details. Let's get to brass tacks here.
Yeah. Like I kind of thought, I don't know. Again, like I'm thinking about what you're doing and what George did, and how both of you guys are really tapping into like an emotional energy in your paneling, where there's attention given to the characters in terms of like the rendering detail, and then you kind of let things almost in a dreamlike way. You're the opposite of fussy with your environments, and I think that's really interesting. And it's a clear stylistic approach that, like, it's nice to see that you're comfortable with it. I guess when you're comfortable with it, it makes the reader comfortable. You know what I mean? Like it looks intentional and it looks like it's something that you're able to navigate and tell stories through. So it's working well so far.
Thank you. Yeah, and I have to fight a fussy tendency in myself because I came out of realism. Right. So the temptation is I must make every fingernail correct. I must make every, shackle on the wall. Right. And really, by emphasizing the character, like I really want people focusing specifically on like what is going through her head. And I kind of want them to pick up visually on who she is without, in a novel format, I could obviously like go into her thoughts and like write paragraphs and paragraphs of her inner monologue, but in a visual medium, I've got to like say it with just like what she's doing, with herself and with her face. And for me, that's the charm of comics. It's different than reading. I think reading novels is good for absorbing lots of maybe like unspoken thoughts from a character, but the comic format lets you see things. It really is just its own medium because of that. Because as an artist, you're now contributing to kind of like the writing aspect of establishing the character.
Yeah.
I mean, I see some of that with like Marcellus, right? Like the first time we see him, he's having this deeply emotional moment and he's crying. So you're aware of that too, kind of like the emotional inner life of the characters.
Yeah. I guess it's fun to I guess. Story like visual storytelling is acting, and it's nice to you have to write the script and you have to understand as concretely as possible for yourself, for your own purposes, what the character is going through from panel to panel. but then you get to act it out, and you have to be able to nail, you know, they have to clearly be feeling exactly what you need them to feel, just in a single image, you know, and that's a fun challenge, which you know all about now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant to ask, were some of the quotes from like the ancient orbs and stuff, are you drawing from like the historical sources you're such a nerd about, or are you just writing dialogue for it and then kind of like, I don't know, like imitating that voice? It sounds a little like the biblical Greek voice, but it's obviously not from the Bible. Do you like take direct inspiration from all the little like historical documents you read?
Oh yeah. That's part of the fun, like, Easter egginess of it, where hopefully it doesn't come off as too highfalutin or too distracting. It hopefully just feels like it's giving a sense of age, I guess, and in confusion, in a sense that, like, oh, this is something's mysteriously going on, and hopefully it'll get resolved later. But it's all coming from documents themselves. Like, I didn't write any of it. So one's like a temple of Amun, kind of hymn to the sun sort of thing, that I felt like, oh, this sounds like a judgment narrative. I really like this, so I'm going to have, you know, the sickly green guy. I'm going to have him coming as like the prophet, like in a very Roman style of the Ides of March kind of thing, like show up, and the oracle is going to be proclaiming woes on the city and on the man. But I'm going to steal it out of an Egyptian text. And then the other one is the Shepherd of Hermas, which I think is a 3rd century kind of proto-Gnostic story. But like, I like that one because that's the one that opens chapter 2, and that kind of feels like there's some sort of weird fantastical dream, and it has a female-centered narrative focus. And it sounds like good things are happening and bad things are happening. There's some comfort and yet some challenges, and so that kind of can emotionally set the tone for what to expect, you know, but not spell anything out whatsoever. Just kind of tonally give you an impression, I guess. I don't know. So,
like, I'm interested in a different like period of history than you. I'm like dead interested in Italian Renaissance. You know, especially like all these documents where they're yelling at each other about pay rates, right? But I always see like there's a human element to it that still speaks to us, right? Like I see an Italian artist begging his patron for more money, and I just say, wow, art. That's the same artist problem, you know, stretching all the way across, you know, time to us today.
Yeah. So, like I said, I did finish reading Kyrie, the first volume, and I have to say that the only disappointment that I had in it, that it was over so quick.
Yeah.
You just set up so many interesting things in that first couple of issues that I absolutely wanted to go ahead and I just was like, I turned the next page and I was just like, well, that was the last page.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah.
But with that, you've got quite a bit more actually finished, right?
Yeah, I've got book 2 in the can. I set up the print files a week ago. I'm just trying to see about this poster. I'm trying to create some more merch that's already ready done, and you know, mentally prepare myself for when and how to approach a book 2 campaign.
So now, here's one question I have: is there is an artifact, and I'm not going to spoil it too much, but there's a ruby that is part of the first act in that thing. Is that based on any actual artifact, or is that is that something made up for plot device?
Did it feel real?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
It felt as real as anything in like an Indiana Jones kind of a thing, where
good.
It's like, you know, that where you're like, oh, I've heard of that. I think, you know, so, that sort of thing. And so yeah, that was one of those things where I thought I was curious to find out if that was I mean, obviously, it has, not to give too much away, it has properties that are firmly placed within a mythic structure. That doesn't mean a real one doesn't exist somewhere. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing okay, so my impression when it comes to famous gemstones is that they all have really cool names.
Yes.
Like there's a really famous one from Afghanistan. It's like the largest diamond in the world. It's actually in the Queen of England's.
The Hope Diamond?
Okay, maybe that would be
the Cullinan Diamond.
No, it's called like the Serene Mountain in. Anyway, I'll look it up when someone else is talking. But when something is that unique, it's like you just kind of have to work to find a name that feels mysterious and interesting, and then you have to make sure the lore feels like it's narratively driven. It's not just a bunch of facts and figures. It has to feel
right.
And in giving it a name that has a personality, like the Red Lady of Babylon. So, and there's like a woman in red who's the protagonist in the story. So you've got this sense of it's an object, but it's kind of a character, sort of.
Right.
And you're already seeing maybe some parallels and similarities between an incendiary protagonist, and you start to, I don't know. So that, like, I like MacGuffins, but the challenge with MacGuffins is they can't appear to be a MacGuffins as you're reading.
Exactly.
They have to feel like something that you actually want, that you want to find when you're invested. So, yeah.
Well, I was actually one of the things I found most intriguing. Why I'm quite anxious about the second volume is the second chapter is titled the Wolf of I can't remember the name of it. I wish I had it in front of me. Thinking.
The Black Wolf of Palmyra.
There you go. It's you should know. But it was based on the whole. The whole thing, and of course it features Marcus is a huge factor in that chapter, but there's just so much about him that is just left on the side where he's coming out of this trance, this daze he's in, to actually go through and kind of become this on one shades this violent physical being, and on the other side this hyper intellectual, almost not connected to this time and place. He's kind of in his own mind for part of it.
Like hyper cerebral.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that to have that dichotomy in character, it makes me want to see, of course, more, and I really enjoyed that quite a bit.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. That's something I've learned from reading a lot of John Truby, he's like a script doctor guy in Hollywood, and he says every character needs to have they need to have a desire, and they need to have a need. The desire they're aware of. Marcus's desire that no one should be harmed. Okay, so he's constantly trying to figure out. He's trying to withdraw himself. He's trying to protect everybody. He's trying to stop pain constantly. But his need is something that he's not aware of and the audience is not aware of. Or maybe they become aware of before the character does. But over the course of trying to pursue his desire, which he is conscious of, the character needs to actually get their need met by the story's conclusion. The need is their wound, the real thing that's motivating, that's ruining their life and making them obsessed about fulfilling their desire to compensate for that wound. So if they're going to be blindly trying to, Marcus is going to be blindly trying to keep anyone from getting hurt, but because of his wound, he keeps hurting people. He's the one who's killing people in the story.
Right.
He can't control that because he has a wound that's blinding him from his need.
Some
so
sort
he's
of
just focused on his desire. So
crazy rage action there.
yeah, but it has to be connected. So they need to have, as you can see, he's willing. He's going to follow. He's going to bring the soldier. He's going to keep him tied up, and he's going to jump off the boat that's sinking. It's spoilers. Yeah, he's going to follow Myra, but so they're going to go on their mission. They've accepted the call for the quest, and they're going. But it's really because he's trying to keep anyone from being harmed. But obviously, the real thing is, can he get his need met? And the same thing goes for Myra, the female, and even for the soldier. He's going to get fleshed out a lot too. So you're going to see some fun stuff. I just like that a lot. Like put a ragtag group of broken characters, all of them believe lies about themselves to get along, and then over the course of the story, they learn to face those lies that other people have told them, to the point that they internalize them, that they realize maybe that I don't know. Then they can face their actual need, and they can either overcome them or fail, and it becomes a tragedy. So that's my philosophy of storytelling. I'll get off my soapbox.
Well, no, I think it's really. I think you've got everything in place to kind of follow through with that. I actually did remember there was one other minor complaint I had about Myra's name. Doesn't get mentioned very soon, and so she's just a nameless woman that I had no connection to by name. I'm a person, I like to know who people are because it helps me square them in my mind, even if it's like a fantasy novel where I can't say the name. If I can recognize this group of letters has this attitude and these traits.
So she did kind of like shrewdly avoid mentioning her name, right? When she was asked.
Yeah,
and that was thinking. I thought it was that lady.
Fair enough. That's and that was one of those things where that it especially stuck out to me too, because the other thugs also were seemed fairly nameless. So for me, it felt like I was a little adrift up until they got in the boat, and then their characters were so significant with everything that happened on the ship that it stopped being so much of an issue.
Yeah, that's very fair. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, maybe I think I might have suspended things for too long.
Yeah,
and could have.
I mean, you originally did this as a webcomic too, right?
Yeah, and you might be able to get a sense of the pacing of every 16 pages or so was an update. So, which was actually kind of nice because it helped me to keep things didn't slow down too much. I don't think in this book because I had to keep things, every 12 to 16 pages there had to be kind of a bit of rising tension and some resolution.
Yeah, I think I actually thought the pace was really good, so I didn't feel like it lagged. Like there was any time. I mean, I sat down. I was just gonna read a little bit of it because it was really late, and I read the whole thing. So.
Oh. How long did it take you, by the way? I'm just curious. I've always wanted to ask.
I think probably
minutes. An hour, really?
Yeah, maybe hour, 40 minutes. I mean, 40 minutes or an hour, something like that.
Oh my goodness! Wow, Thank you. I'm honored. That's a lot. That's a lot of time for one comic.
Well, I tend to try to really absorb them. So and if there's something I'm not clear on, I'll go back and double check them. One of the favorite things for me about comics is their ability to rewind time and refresh yourself on the pertinent details.
Definitely.
And since Kyrie moved, I had so much going on. There was definitely I was like, no, okay, I feel like I missed something. Oh, here it was. So, that's one of the things for me. But
I remember when Scott McCloud said something about it's the only visual. It's the only medium where you're doing you're able to play the film. I guess it's like one of those old timey 100 years ago kind of film cameras where you're actually continually winding it at a certain pace to keep the film going through, and you can kind of run it at your own pace or run it backwards, or I guess it's even better than that. You can kind of look at anything in any order. But hopefully you're reading it, the way you should. But
yeah.
And,
but yeah, I mean, I think some of the great things about Curious is I think the color is really vivid, which I don't know if you caught the other day. Doug Garrett was talking about it on his live stream, and that was one of the things he really pointed out was how vivid the color was. So I think
it was really nice.
You had a real fight with trying to make it so the print file was the way it needed to be, and I think that because it really does have a lot of color.
That's why it was late. Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah, that was a challenge. Fortunately, the next book there's a lot of daytime. I'm never gonna do an entire book that goes from sunset to sunrise. I think it's an interesting challenge, but I think it's kind of a dumb move. Or it forces you to really have to solve really interesting challenges. Like, how do you make this interesting and look different, every few pages, even though it just goes over the course of 12 hours. So,
I also like how the cover design aspect you did, and how that the interior is all purple and the cover is yellow coated, so it frames your work nicely. That was just a nice little additional touch.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. One thing that actually I didn't even plan that I liked the most was the edges, how they're kind of purple, because it was like it just ran off to the edge. I didn't do like a white border. So like just looking at the side of the book, it's like, oh wow, that's weird. Like, why? So he's got purple pages? Like, what's going on there? I'm glad I didn't do white.
Well, it's a great looking book for sure. So, now you would pick an interesting an abnormal ratio for the page size, the size of the pages. Was there a reason for that, or was that just how?
Gosh, you want to hear my big brain reason for why it's the dimensions that it is?
That is why I asked.
Okay, so when I started chipping away at this story, initially back in 2015 or so, I thought, okay, so what do people print books on? I don't know. I guess like printer paper. What's printer paper? 8.5 by 11. Oh, that's cool. I'll just open up a Photoshop page. Here's 8.5 by 11. Let's just start drawing. And then I find out that's not at all what has ever happened. And then I had to scale it down from 8.5 by 11, so it's proportionally an 8.5 by 11 page. That's where the book comes from.
It feels very natural to read at that ratio, and that may well be because of your design fits the shape of the page really well. And I know part of that is you and I have talked that you like to draw things in 2-page layouts because that's how you read it, and so I'm sure that's a big factor, is that because you're looking at each spread as it goes, it has a nice flow of action. But it doesn't seem like I'm reading a even though it's smaller than average, it doesn't feel like I'm reading a digest or something like that.
Thanks. One of the upsides I think was it's a little squatter, right? But when you open it up, this is me. I mean, I'm probably just rationalizing, but I like how when the book is open, because it's squatter, it actually feels. Proportionally, it's wider now, so your spread is wider. Yeah. So it's almost, you get a bit more of a cinematic feel with that extra horizontal thing, instead of like opening up these super tall books and then you've got like a square in your lap. Like, this is almost like getting to that. What is it? Not quite like the 8 by 15 or whatever it is, but it's almost that cinematic like wideness that. I don't know. Like, I just like how it takes up a little bit more of your peripheral field of vision now, and hopefully it feels a little bit more immersive. But honestly, none of this is planned. I'm not going to hide. I just took an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and made everything to that 5 years ago. So
yeah, that's amazing.
So you know, the narrow format exists because that was a convenient magazine format, right? So it's a good format. Lots of art's been done in that format, but you don't have to stick to that. And I definitely, because you designed it with your format in mind, it works. Like I almost immediately get drawn into it, and I stop caring about the unusual size.
Yeah. It's just one of those things where it'll stick out on the shelf next to the other trades I have because it's a little different, but I think it's perfectly serviceable. I just think it's interesting to think about what goes on into that. I know, like Rico, one of our artists who's worked with us, he's done his webcomic into print form, and he uses a 4-panel grid on a 8x10 area, and so they're squat as well. But, he's got, and so we're actually going to be releasing one this year, hopefully. That's our Joe Jobs print version, and that's going to be in that same 2 ratio. And I think it'll be fine, but or 5-4 ratio. But yeah.
Though there is something to be said. I remember Jason Brubaker. I mean, back before any of us were doing live streams, like Jason Brubaker was doing them like 5-6 years ago, and he used to talk about how it's important to, I don't even know this. Okay, now that I'm saying this, like none of this might be relevant anymore. This is all super like boomer logic, but designing a tall book and designing the top half of it to have a lot of really interesting eye-catching stuff so that it's peeking over whatever is in front of it on the bookshelf if it's lying flat against display case sort of thing, if you're competing for that. But I don't even know, I mean, Jason isn't competing in that sense anymore, and I don't know if anyone is, so maybe disregard that. But that's something to keep in mind if you want to stand out on a shelf, on a display shelf, if anyone's ever gonna actually put our stuff on shelves. So mine's probably hiding immediately because it's squat.
Well, maybe one thing, it just occurred to me kind of tragically, like if you wanted to do like the floppy format, like because of your 8.5 by 11 format, that might be foreclosing some options off for you. Shoot.
Yeah.
The other side of that too, though, is like being somebody who's like tabled at cons and stuff. You have books in different sizes; they layer, and they naturally layer. And so if you're introducing a table to somebody, you can say, okay, well, here's mini comics, and here's these and these, and so you already have that flip through it thing built in, and anything you can do to lure somebody's hands on your work, the better you are. So that's one of those things where if you're at a con, the object is to trap somebody in a way that they don't know that they're trapped, and convince them to touch your goods, your book, is you're way more likely to make a sale if somebody's taken enough time to actually put it in their hands. So that's why the tchotchkes and that kind of thing are a big deal. We don't have a lot of tchotchkes. I just I'm not good at designing that kind of stuff. So you were talking about posters and postcards and all that kind of stuff. That's one of those things, man. I'd love to have more of that stuff, but that's not where my brain is at all. Because I'm not any good at that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing. Like, I never thought I'd be interested. I'm all about the book, man. And now that I put a book in y'all's hands, like, I'm all about the tchotchkes right now. I think I need a mental break, but also it's nice just to have the simple joy of making something pretty for someone and not have to worry about spell checking. I don't know, like dealing with crazy printers over China overseas and
China. You got a horrible deal.
No more China. No more China. Like just make a really nice super deluxe sticker that you can sell someone for $2. Like, doesn't that sound fun? Like that does not give me a headache. So, and I've never even been to a convention. I mean, I've never tabled. So I'm super jealous that you've even done that. And that
I've only tabled. I've never been to a convention just for fun.
Oh my gosh.
It was one of those things where, like, when we were first starting, but early on in the process, somebody had suggested to one of my partners that we need to go ahead and before you ever table, make sure that you go to a con and just enjoy the experience and know what it's like on the other side of the table. And Chris and Barry were like, yeah, we're going to do that. And so they went to the Baltimore Comic Con and got to meet a bunch of people, and it was real fun. And I was like, yeah, I'm not going to spend money to just go be a spectator. I can do that from my living room. So
nowadays, yeah.
So I've never been to a con just as a dude, and I just, I'm here to sell stuff. I'm here to tell stories, and I'm here to lure you into my world. You can't. The thing is you can't. Tabling at a con is exhausting. So if you're people, you're going to spend some time away from the table, and you'll get to rub shoulders with other creators and talk to other AMs and pros and all that kind of stuff. But
that's amazing.
You get to do all that stuff, but you don't have. Anyway, you just also get to be exhausted at the end of it all. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've done a bunch of small cons and all up and down the Front Range here in Colorado, and there's just tons of little conventions, and so I've been to several of them, and we've been going out of Fort Collins. This will be our 5th year probably this August.
Midwest is a good scene. There's the Milwaukee Zine Fest. Wait, what was I thinking of? Minneapolis Zine Fest. Madison has a Zine Fest.
Yeah.
NebraskaCon's the closest I can think of for the Nebraska area.
There's and of course I'm on the committee that co-hosts one out in Scotts Bluff every October. So then if there's anybody in Nebraska who's interested in traveling out to Scotts Bluff in the 17th of October next year, we're gonna be there for that one. But yeah. Yeah, Star has joined us in the chat. Hello, Star.
Hey, Star.
Star's a regular from my channel. She has a lot of thoughtful comments.
She's been over here several times. We've had her on as a guest a couple. So, Twitless says, I'm a huge fan of working cons. Con jobs are the best. Mm-hmm. So, the guy cracks me up. We had he and his art partner on for this last week. They do the webcomic Super School, which is very similar. And also very not to my own Forces of Good and Evil. And those guys, we talked for 2 hours, and I was like, just by the time I was about tired of laughing, I noticed 2 hours had gone by. So I was like, I'm going to kick you guys off. So that was quite a thing. So Marmaduke, with Jane Smith, what are you looking at for a release date, or have you figured that out yet?
I'm going to shoot hard for late 2020, early 2021. And I've seen so many of my friends have problems with the printer. I absolutely want to commit to I don't even want to start the crowdfunding campaign until I have a complete story, not just the art done, but lettered and basically files ready to print. Hopefully that'll just help. Hopefully that'll help me save me from a catastrophe. Oh no, I don't know what the printer's doing. Right.
Well, honestly, if you're just doing black and white, you shouldn't have too much trouble with something like that.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons I'm considering a homebrew.
Yeah.
I think I'll advertise it as the DIY edition just to be really upfront about it. And I'll probably do some video. So yeah, and I'll probably do some videos showing it off. I hate glossy magazine paper for some reason. I think I have, and that's supposed to be the premium paper. But I had something when I was a kid where I almost liked the idea of coloring in my comics if I wanted to, and the parchment paper just feels nicer. It feels like what I'm used to drawing on, right? So, I need a virgin versus Chad, glossy paper versus parchment paper.
Oh man, I want to see that drawing.
One of the things that actually goosed me is the original title for this was actually going to be the Leap Year Games, but then I thought no one knows what the Leap Year Games. The Leap Year Games isn't a character, so I was shooting for. I was really thinking, well, I'll do it on February 29th because that's Leap Year's Day, right? But then I'm not going to like force myself to date that, but it's kind of. I think this is a leap year, right? So it's kind of like giving me a window that I want to get chapter 1 done this year, and I want to get the entire story arc done. Beginning, middle, and end by next leap year, so I can kind of like do some kind of like Leap Year's Day celebration in 4 years. So I'll pull open the art if you guys want to hear me like sprung about it.
Yeah, sure, go for it, man. Yeah,
I think I know how to do this. Wait. Okay, I do share screen. Okay, look for make sure I don't have my social security number out here.
Yes.
I think
zero doxing channel. Can't even dox yourself.
All right. And then open in preview. So I'm using oh, well, that's not right. I'm using Alterna as basically a model where I just use their like submission guidelines. And I said, okay, if that's what Alterna wants you for submitting it, I'll use that as like a way of like sizing it. I've noticed there's some differences. Like I have like a nice pad of Bristol board that's like for comic book artists, and it has like blue lines around it.
Yep.
And I've noticed their blue lines don't line up with Alterna's blue lines, but it still gives me like a good general framework for knowing like
Alterna's frame is smaller, and their bleed area is larger, and that's because of the way it rolls off of the press that they use.
Okay.
For that and that's just the technology difference. So, but yeah, because they have to, they just have to size it up different. So your average comic book page, it's going to be 6 and the page after the cut is going to be 6 and 5/8 by 10 and an 1/8, and then the actual print area is going to be 6.5 by 10.
And I always save your working files, of course. So I save all my Photoshop documents in case I ever need to go back and reformat something for a different publisher. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The one thing about it is that when you're looking at, and I just love that black and white charcoal look, man. That's just so distinctive. It's just got such a pop to it.
But behind the scenes story, I started at page 1 in ink, and then I just I finished drawing it in ink. I didn't like it, and I said, "What am I doing? I hate ink. I hate ink. I should draw in the medium I like, which is charcoal."
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. That's great.
One of my art teachers, his way of getting it was I call him the Renaissance man. His way of getting us to think about Renaissance drawing techniques was basically to force us to use mediums we were uncomfortable with. So this isn't Vine charcoal. This is charcoal pencil. But when we use Vine charcoal, right? Like if you're used to drawing in lines, it forces you to draw in black and white and shade. So it basically just kind of takes you right back to square one. You have to reteach yourself how to draw all over again. And pretty much ever since then, I've had a love for charcoal. It's a messy medium, but it's such a rich black. And I also like being able to bring pressure into things. Like with ink, black is black. Maybe you can water it down or use a gray ink, but with charcoal, you could literally draw all over it and dust it slightly, and then you could work from gray and erase to get back to white. So
yeah.
And then sometimes I'll keep in a hand hit. Sometimes I write the letters where I know they're supposed to go, just to block it out. So I might keep a handwritten element, like the word "small" here is handwritten, but then clean up the normal lettering with. I just went with what I thought was a good looking handwritten font, kind of for nice, big, broad, easy to read capital letters.
Right. Yeah. No, I like it, man. So very cool.
This one took 3 revisions because originally I was going to have her like bonk into her older brother, but he didn't look that impressive or intimidating. And I knew if the whole point is that her brother is basically Hercules and she's basically like 5 foot nothing and 100 pounds, then he has to look like Hercules and feel powerful on his first big appearance. So I thought that would be worth a two-page spread. And I'm going to try to like avoid 2-page spreads unless, you know, I think there needs to be like a narrative merit for a 2-page spread. It has to, you have to be saying wow narratively. You can't just have like a big giant 2-page spread moment for a little thing. It has to, an introduction of an important character felt like that for me. Both of these horses came from my little sister works with horses and teaches horse riding, so I've gotten a lot of good reference footage over the years for that. And then a little not cool ancient Macedonian Greek text, but I got a little of Joseph's story snuck in here, kind of to relate thematically. So, you know, like Joseph's story is all about, you know, envy between the brothers and Joseph. So I thought that would be, you know, kind of a neat way of underscoring Jane's problem, which is that she's jealous of her sibling.
Yeah, nice.
And Josie Smith in the bottom right corner, she wasn't in any of the early drafts. She's only in the most recent draft of the story I outlined. But I always knew I wanted like a bigger family. Like it's a Midwest conservative family. Like 2 doesn't feel like a good fit. But I never had a character who made sense as the third sibling. Like I experimented with baby. I experimented with twins, and it's just the thing where I'm always, if I'm just drawing characters and I draw something I like and then I look at the drawing, it's like, now I understand who that character is, and now I can't imagine the story without her. She was kind of like the missing piece, I think. And this is page 9, and that's the last one that's lettered. 10 is drawn, and I've got to letter it, so I'll probably be working on that later tonight.
Do you think of yourself more as a painter or a drawer? Like even when you're using like, you know, a drawing utensil, are you thinking of yourself as kind of like painting in shapes and in values, or?
Yeah, I think of myself as a drawer, and that's even true if I'm using pastel. Like my favorite thing about pastel is it produces the brightness of oil paints, but I get to hold it like a stick in my hand. I've done a lot of painting, but what is it about paint? For me, painting is almost purely like it's hard for me to imagine a comic book that contains painting within it, because painting is such a soft range of values kind of approach. And I think like one of the reasons that cartoons, you know, so many comic book artists were cartoonists is I think the simplicity fits better with format like black and white boxes, black and white words, black and white characters, right? So I'm not saying you can't be a painter and make a graphic novel that has a painting sensibility, but I think like maybe the immediacy of a line, you know, that where you have to interpret the character's fate, something about that to me just fits nicer with the feel of the comic book. That's one of the reasons I don't like I don't like modern lettering that much. Like I had to stop myself. I thought I'm going to hand letter everything, but I'm not a very good letterer. So I said my concession is okay, fine, I'll digitally letter it. But even I think sometimes digital lettering in comic books sometimes feels a little out of place with the rest of it. So that was me telling my OCD to shut up, and I can't spend 90 years working on this.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
So yeah, maybe Matt, tying into that, like when I look at your work, like one of the things that stands out about it is kind of like the overall like color harmony of it. So do you ask that because maybe you see a little bit of, I don't know, like a painting approach in your own work?
Yeah. Like I try to be a painter even when I draw. Like I guess I came out of more of a strict realism background too, but I started actually discovering the joy of drawing, not for an assignment and not for money or anything like that. When I just allowed myself to use even a pencil, like a brush, and just kind of think like, how can I just kind of make a juicy stroke out of this, and have each kind of brush and each kind of and the happy mistakes that you get, because there's so much more mistakes with painting. How can you make them appealing too, I guess? And I feel like you're well, if you don't think of yourself as a painter, you're certainly approaching a lot of your content in a painterly way. That makes me think of. I mean, I guess that's just what charcoal is, but I don't know. I'm being drawn to your kind of painterly approach, what I consider to be a painterly approach, because it all, I don't know. You're having fun with just kind of blocking in these fun swirly values, and you're not noodling details, and so that, to me, that speaks painter. But
yeah.
I think he maybe went on.
I don't know. Are we there?
I think I scared him off.
Oh, he actually did drive. Oh, he's back. Here he is. Hang on.
Okay. I think I actually kicked myself out when I was trying.
Yeah, I think you did. I was trying to turn it back on, and I couldn't get there. Yeah. As far as so Marm, the one thing though, as far as preparing your stuff for black and white, having done that in the past, once you got your formatting correct, and your black values aren't too high for the sake of the thing, because if you get too much, you can when you shrink it can muddy, right?
Yeah.
Once you've double checked that stuff, it's pretty straightforward. Those are really the only two things you got going on with it. One of the things, because one of the things you got to realize is that printing technology has increased so much since we started back in our first print book was 07, I think, right? And then the highest anybody printed was 300 DPI. And now it's pretty routine to be able to find digital printers that can print at 600. And so, we couldn't even get a scanner. That was one of the problems we had, because we didn't have a rig to do photo, the photographic transfer for doing reductions to digitally do that. And so what we ended up doing with it was, we took our big paper and photocopy reduced it and then scanned that in. And so our first edition of Zing lost a ton of the fine detail in the ink work. And it looked really muddy. And so when we ended up doing, a few years ago when we did our second edition, we went and rescanned in some of the work, because digital scanners are now a thing that a normal person can afford that are at format. And so we were able to redo our first anthology with a lot better preservation of the line work, which I was very happy about. I'm very, very happy about. But yeah, we have as far as you shouldn't, I don't think, because you're just doing black and white, your stuff should not have much of a problem with it, I don't think.
Yeah.
So, as long as your ratios and formats are right.
I'm persnickety about that. Yeah, I probably just got to get a hand stapler and a nice paper cutter, and I'll be set to. I don't know. I got to come up with a fancy name for it, basement comic book productions or something.
Rhys, do you understand? Because Marm and I were talking about this, and I don't understand this very much. But do you understand offset printing as opposed to the other approach?
Yeah. Offset printing is what old newspapers used to use. And
the one with the little dot.
Actually, modern newspapers too. But what it is each color is separated into the CMYK layers, and then they're each printed separately. So you've got one printer that only prints cyan, one printer that only prints magenta, one printer that only prints yellow, and one printer that prints black. And then it's just layered, boom, 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 and according to, and it's all broken down into little dots and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that's what offset printing is, and like magazines still use offset printing a lot of times. But
I mean, they used to have the things like called 4-color comics, right? It was that same process.
Yeah, I mean, all comics we use that setup, and modern, and there is a bit of a difference today between offset printing and like newspaper printing. It's a similar process, and actually, I'm kind of misspeak when I said it's a different printer for each color. It's really a different part of the process because it's all run through at once. So, like if you got a newspaper that uses a 4-color process, which virtually all of them do, it runs through this huge, giant 2-story. It's the size of Walmart. That's a printer, right? It's just a massive beast, and rolls of paper going one side, and then on the other side comes out folded newspapers. And so, yeah, they're massive things, and it does all. It's one machine that does all of that kind of stuff. And so I don't know if you guys kept up on Alterna's printer search when they had their contract.
No.
They ended up in November having to announce that their printer was canceling their contract with them, and that they had not printed the November issues.
Wow. And
Peter found out that the price that the printer had quoted them a year ago was hyper deflated, and it must have been based upon having an overabundance of stock of paper. Because at the end of it, they were like, "No, we just can't even do this." So they just canceled Alterna's printing a week, contract a week after they were supposed to have gone to print for the December comics, and yeah, it was a huge mess. And with it, he said he talked to about 100 different printers trying to find one that could give him a similar deal, and he ended up going with a company out of the SeaTac area that he had worked with previously. That he was the old, so he makes a joke. It's the new old printer, because they had Alterna had been with them in 2017, and most of 2018, and then had switched over to this other printer, and then they went back to those other guys. But all because everything's more expensive now, Alterna's comics are going up about 50 cents a piece. So that makes me sad, but I understand it. $2 is still not much for a good comic. So.
Oh, there's still more than it's about like half the price of a Marvel comic.
Oh yeah, and so much better. In nearly every conceivable marker. So, yeah, it's but yeah, so that's it. So some like high-end printers, and actually there's because there are printers that do RGB printing. It's not actually true RGB per se, but they use, instead of using the 4-color process, it uses a 12-color process. So the color saturation matches RGB in a way that your regular printer doesn't, because they can't quite get every color. And most of those are offset printers that'll do that. It's slightly different than the newspaper setup, but it's the same thing where you've got a layer for the different color separations, and then they're printed together in a way that either mixes the color on the page or overlays it, depending on which exact system they're going.
Yeah.
And then in newspaper printing, you've got hot set presses and you've got cold set presses. And hot set presses can print faster, but they're also more likely to flute the pages because the ink dries inconsistently.
Oh,
okay.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. And especially if it's thinner paper. But cold dry presses can print faster. They just have to take more dry time. So, but they can print faster. And also it takes less ink for a cold set press too. But you can't get glossy finish very well, I think, is I understanding right. That part I might be wrong on, because I'm not a printer. I've just read about them and heard about them. So,
yeah.
But yeah, for most indie guys that I've talked to over the last decade, they usually use smaller print houses that use digital printers, and that's the same kind of thing that George Alexopoulos has done with Mary Sue. is it's a commercial grade digital printer, and it's like your home laser printer, except it's the third Billy Goat Gruff of the digital printers.
Yeah. Maybe you guys don't know any more than I do, because I don't know terribly much. But my impression is that he paid something. Maybe it's like $3 or $4 grand at most.
Yeah. Between two and $4 grand is one of those machines, and it's equivalent to the ones like they use at Staples. If you go down to the Staples Print Center,
yeah,
it's basically that machine, and it's like $2 and $4 grand for it, and it's the size of a compact car. I exaggerate a little bit. It's the size of 2 Harley Davidsons. So it wouldn't fit in my house, right? Because I live in a small 80-year-old house. But yeah, I mean, like a lot of people would have room for something like that in their home, and it's professional grade equipment. So that's what George printed on, was just it was I don't know the exact make and model of it, but I know the kind of machine because I've been in and out of print shops getting stuff done for a decade. So
yeah. I think that was really. I think it continues to be like, I was impressed with the quality, and I know it's not just the printing; it's his experience as a like working as a printer or whatever you call that, print master or whatever.
Yeah, he was a print maker, is what it was. And he worked for a print shop that used that kind of printer and that made posters and graduation pictures and invitations and that kind of stuff. And
that is kind of the hidden element, is that he has that experience. That the easy part's anyone can buy a printer, but but beyond that, like I think he has demonstrated successfully that it can be done. So it's been fascinating. There were high stakes, but he met my expectations and exceeded them.
Yeah, I was. That's one of those that I was really, I guess you could say, unhappy that I was not able to buy into that book, because it looks really interesting. And I know he's offering he's looking at doing print on demand this year, and he does have some backstock that he's selling right now. But it's just a little beyond my means still at the moment.
Yeah.
And part of that comes down to a decision that I've chosen to make, is that I pretty much am just not going to be buying any crowd funds probably for the rest of the year, because my spare money is going to be going to a project that I'm probably going to be announcing tomorrow, if I can get some cues in place. For that, I'm very, very excited for this.
That's great.
That's gonna get our stuff, my cash. But yeah, that's where we're at with all of that. But yeah, so but anyway, the other thing. So we've talked about each other's books. Well, yours, and I'm excited. I'm super excited for Jane Smith. I think you've got a visual style with that, Marm, that is just beyond anything that's being produced right now in terms of its rawness, its authenticness. It's like the garage band of the indie comic scene, and everybody's trying to be Twisted Sister, and you're out here being the Ramones, and I love that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I don't catch the musical reference, but I appreciate your feedback.
Well, it would probably help if you were, in your 40s and into punk rock. But I am a product of my time.
I gotta find that great Jack Kirby quote. I know it's quoted in the comic book history of comics, where it's Jack Kirby's thoughts on dynamism in comics itself, and dynamism kind of being central to his view of comics. But like my view of traditional art is I like live drawing, and I like my teacher would make me draw the figure in 30 seconds, and then the figure would move, and then we'd have to draw her in 10 seconds, and then she'd move. Right. So I like the fact that if I'm moving fast while drawing, then I think I don't know, maybe this is just romantic, but I feel like it adds maybe a sense of the characters moving fast as well.
I think so.
Stanley's also got this great line, if you're not happy with the first few lines, just keep adding more and more lines. And one of these days, maybe you'll be giving John Buscema lessons, right? Thanks, Stanley. I can do it. I know I
can. That's hilarious. One of the things about man, we got some fun stuff in the chat, but one of the things sorry that I was going to say something, and then that crack about Fukushima just derailed me entirely. That's hilarious.
Destroyed.
Oh man, it just wrecked my whole day. Anyway, back to talking about the musical references. The metal says I'm in my late 20s, but I get that reference. Thanks my parents. And Star says I just don't want to get screwed by a printer if I can help it. I think that's the goal for everyone. Part of that, not to, because I don't know all the details, I don't want to get on too much on that, but looking at the whole stealing solo issue, I don't know the whole story, but I will tell you that at least half of what happened was due to not asking the right questions.
Yeah.
Knowing how to ask the right questions is a very, very important thing for it.
Yeah. Yeah, like I've worked since, like, I'm in my mid-30s. I've been working since my mid-20s in illustration and closely linked to marketing departments that have to figure out printer stuff. So, like, close enough to be able to guess what sort of questions. Like, I just barely got this printer thing together. Like, actually getting it together where there wasn't a giant catastrophe. So like, when I saw that happen, I did not think someone's trying to swindle, or that he's the stupidest person on planet Earth who's ever done an Indiegogo. It's that you really can get over your head really fast. This isn't printing T-shirts. This isn't printing stickers and swag. This is a book, and that's
everything
a very challenging. Yeah. And there's going to be 100 things you need to know that you need to be confident about with your printer before you can actually push the button. And they don't teach you this stuff in school. There's no books about it. There's I don't know what you do. You just have to ask people who know more than you do, I guess.
Yeah. I think a big part of the whole process is just that being willing to ask people that know more than you. And that's one of the things that I think is really I'm not sure even how to say it, but it's one of the defining things about what's going on in the business as it is that we have we're surrounded by a glut, frankly, of talented pros, semi-pros, longtime amateurs who are willing to share that experience. And so I look at, every once and again, you guys have probably noticed I occasionally get into beefs with people online about stupidness, right?
No.
Yeah.
So every once and again, somebody tries to make me feel bad because we didn't raise thousands of dollars on our crowdfunding this summer, and I'm like, I've been printing comics since 2006. You're an idiot.
Well, because you
can't impress me with how smart you are as a fan. I've been doing this longer than you've been reading.
Their range of focus is 2017. They think the world came into existence in 2017 on comics Twitter. And so the idea that people have lives beyond that. One of the problems is, the internet makes everything worse. It's a force multiplier. Go back 100 years, and you could read all the great philosophers' entire collected works, right? Feasibly in your lifetime, and now you can flash forward to today, and you can't even feasibly read, every idiot on Twitter's, lifetime his, right? So you've got to. It's impossible for the human mind to grasp like all this nonsense that's being thrown onto the internet. So you have to be discriminating about.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that we've been having this debate kind of like behind the scenes, you and me, Matt, right?
Yeah.
But there's too much stupid stuff in the world for you to pay attention to.
Well, that's true. That's true. But I'm an expert in a very specific level of stupid stuff. But one of the man, I tell you what. But anyway, we talk about that off air sometime because I have thoughts. But I think one of the things I'm trying to remember the guy's name, Coleridge, I believe was the cat's name. I can't remember his first name. He was an English writer who is credited as possibly being the last man on Earth to know everything there was to know.
Wow.
Who lived in the late 1800s, and he was a jack of all trades kind of guy. He was a poet, but he lived at a time just before, everything exploded with information. It was during the end of the first industrial revolution and all that kind of stuff. So he was and he was a polyglot and all kinds of stuff. So he was in that position to be the last person to know everything there was worth knowing. And then all of a sudden, those crazy Americans start producing their own literature, and it's all over. We discovered polio. The germ theory had become a thing, and all this massive jump in scientific knowledge and in industry and everything that happened at that time. And suddenly, no one person can know everything worth knowing anymore. And so it's of course, even that may be a spurious claim, but it is something very to think about.
Because if you go back farther, right, like to before the printing press, it'd be easier to read it, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have it, because
exactly.
we're not printing as much stuff, but also things aren't traveling around. Like I love this story. Matt C's probably heard this story, but James, this Christian apologist guy, James White, he likes to tell the story that one of the reasons that the King James Bible is the way it is that Erasmus didn't have a complete copy of Revelation. So he tried translating Revelations from Latin back into Greek because he couldn't get a Greek copy of it anywhere.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing too about the Textus Receptus, right? The Septuagint. I'm not Septuagint. The text of
Vulgate.
Not the Vulgate. The text of the Old Testament that they had to work from, that was part of the Textus Receptus, was I can't remember the name of the texts right now. It escapes my mind.
Stephanus and Beza.
We should be able to do this.
I should know this instantly, and it's just skipping my head at the minute. But my point is that the Hebrew Old Testament that was used to translate the first version of the King James Bible was the Hebrew that had been translated of the Masoretic. Translated back into Hebrew from the Septuagint, because they didn't have access to any older, and they've found them since then. But the Hebrew texts that were being circulated in Europe that were available, that were part of the Textus Receptus, had been translated from the Septuagint, the Greek, back into Hebrew in like the 4th century, and or maybe it was the 3rd century in Alexandria.
Late antiquity,
Yeah. And so the crazy thing, and this is one of the things that's also wild about this, is that the book of Isaiah, which we of course have found a complete scroll of Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that predates all of that. It doesn't predate the Septuagint, but it comes from a different source, so it's not related to that. The textual variants, including chunks of the Dead Sea Scrolls Isaiah that are missing, is 6% from the Masoretic Isaiah and the Dead Sea Scrolls Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's including chunks of the parchment that don't exist anymore because they've crumbled off.
Good old comics and biblical textual history. You have stumbled into the highly specific interest part of YouTube here, gang.
That's what you end up with. That's what you come to at that Mattriarchy. You never know you're going to get a screed about the nature of American independence, or we're going to talk about that. Well, actually, there were a couple of things I wanted to sideswipe you with. I don't think we're going to be able to get into really, because I know you guys, of course, knew each other before comics Twitter was a thing, and so I was gonna probe into some questions, some doctrinal stuff, but I don't think we have really time to dig into a lot of that. The other thing that I really wanted to talk to you guys each about was looking at the nature of comics as a as a worldwide thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm not entirely as prepared as I wanted to be for that conversation because Marmaduke, you might find this interesting. Well, a couple weeks ago, I bought my first ever manga.
All right, which one was it?
Yeah, it's My Hero Academia. The first volume was on sale at Walmart.
All right. Well, I feel bad that I didn't successfully run over to you and slam the book with my waifu in your face and get that to be your first. But hey, you're making progress.
I wouldn't even know which one that is. You go over so many of those girly comics, I don't even know. But no, and actually, that's the first paper one. I did buy a digital copy of the first volume of Alita Battle Angel, but I haven't had a chance to read it yet. So, but yeah, My Hero Academia is an interesting. I've gotten probably 8 or 12 pages into it was all, because I always find something else to do that takes enough time that I just don't have the time to read as much as I want. Also, Curse of the White Knight is freaking good. I don't know if either of you guys follow Sean Murphy's Batman stuff, but
yeah,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, I bought the first TPB. Very good.
Oh, it's so good. Side note, and then we'll talk about comics as a world phenomenon here, and I mean that, but before White Knight, I was convinced. As I've been reading comics for decades, and I was convinced that Joker was just over. That there was never a good comic Harley Quinn story. That she just didn't deserve to exist in print, and that every Joker story was just done. It's over with. Let's find a new foil for Batman because this is done. There's nothing done with it.
That was the hot take. I mean, everyone had seen Suicide Squad, and
well, even before that, I mean, I was never on board with Harley Quinn outside of the TV series, and the only reason she served to exist in the TV series was because you cannot show murder at 4:00 on a Thursday afternoon. That was it. We want domestic violence is more acceptable than murder, so let's show some domestic violence so that we can go ahead and implicate how evil this guy is. That was the only purpose she existed to serve, and everyone who tried to do something different with her, I just haven't ever respected. Sean Murphy proved me wrong on both counts. I just was like, okay, Mr. Murphy, I'm wrong. okay, you like that? Is that what you wanted?
I think it's noteworthy that he's so heavily influenced by the animated series, where it's kind of like a deep who doesn't like the animated series, right? So it's I'm pretty basic for saying I love the animated series, but I think when you look at the thing that has resonated with the most people as a source of inspiration, I think that gives you a lot of power. Maybe I don't know. I just think it's smart to go back to the wellspring, back to the fountainhead.
And one of the things that the animated series did, right, was that it created a continuity that was both original and derivative. And it was the best of Golden Age Batman, the best of Silver Age Batman, the best of Bronze Age Batman, the best of Denny O'Neil Batman, the best of Alan Grant Batman, just simmered down into this tasty sauce, right? And not every episode was 100% on, but as a collective whole, it was just this distilled essence of Batman, right? And so it had that thing to it, and it was just that's what it was. And so it had something for every fan, right? It had just enough silliness to appeal to those people that really dug the campy 60s show. It had it's just enough humor. It had these dark colors and palettes for people that worshipped at the altar of Frank Miller, and all that stuff. So I just think that was a really good thing. And so I think Murphy spotting that gets to tell this story that speaks to all of those elements and all of those things but still gets to be fresh. It still has that thing. And the other thing I think about it too is that's really fun is that it's kind of the inverse of like Watchmen, or the entire story is a reconstruction of Batman's character and him coming to himself and seeing how he needs to grow. I mean, to grow past his hangups and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Knight is very much a thing on that. So,
though he didn't. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he didn't write it, right?
Oh, he wrote it.
He did, yeah. He's tired of doing art for other writers, so he wants to write his own stuff now. And
he has been for a long time. Like he was working with Vertigo before the drop and did Punk Rock Jesus, and I don't think he's drawn another person's story in a decade.
Oh, so, wow.
I wasn't keyed into him until White Knight. I just saw some of the art, and I'm like, I'll give that first issue a look, and it just punched me in the teeth, man. He just drove right into the motivations behind the characters so well that I was just like, okay, here's my money. I'm going to save this much out to eat with, and then you can just have the rest. And the Curse of the White Knight it's hitting all the same kind of stuff where the thematics and the stuff is consistent, but it's still fresh in a different way, and I love it. I love it so much.
I love how you mentioned you just got your first manga, and we immediately got you back onto superhero comics.
Oh yeah. I see.
More cape stuff.
More cape stuff. Well, and that's actually something that's part of the thing. But first of all, I mean, I know, Matt, you grew up reading comics from foreign nations. What kind of stuff was the stuff that you were keyed into as a young feller?
Well, okay, so our family was good friends with a Danish family, and they were bringing over a lot of Asterix, of course, and Tintin, and other weird things I don't even remember the name of. So I was reading a lot of that with them, and then we lived overseas for about a year, and everyone was reading comics, and zero of it was cape stuff. It's every genre under the sun outside of our bubble, the U.S., and because they understand that it's just a medium. It does not. There's nothing that capes natural. Like, it's not conducive to any particular genre. You know what I mean? It's like writing. I was yelling at Doug TenNapel of all people about this, and
I actually heard that just before. I was listening to him on the way back from Sydney, and I'm going to work around there. Trust me.
Yeah.
If we have enough time, we'll get there.
Well, I knew I'll never convince him of anything, but I thought I'd give it a shot. There's a reason that we're the only country on the planet that has an idea that this medium is connected with a genre. There's no reason for that to be. It's nonsense. I
don't believe that's the true premise, but continue.
Yeah, well, you can disagree with me too. Anyone can disagree with me, but the only reason we think, well, there's reasons why we think that. You've heard my theories, but even in America, comics were every genre under the sun, popularly until the comics code. So, but I'll leave it at that. But so I just read a lot of adventure stuff. I read mystery kind of stuff, and then it dropped off, and then I came back because coming back to America and not having the Danish friends around anymore, and not caring for Spawn or Spider-Man or anything like that. I didn't go back to comics until college, when a lot of my friends were reading manga, and the anthology craze was going nuts. This is like the mid the 2000s, the aughts. Everyone was making really awesome short stories of every genre under the sun, influenced by Europe, South America, Asia, everything. There were Canadian presses doing this stuff. It was just this insane, like, everyone was playing jazz together. I just loved it. And all that, it was a bubble and it burst, and no one makes anthologies anymore, at least not for money. And but from then on I was hooked, but it was just a matter of realizing, okay, I have the internet. I can buy this stuff it's going to cost an arm and a leg, but I can buy it from Stewart Books, or I can, get stuff from overseas, or I can just make my own. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm definitely I'm an exile. I'm a stranger in a strange land in America.
So, and Marmaduke, you of course grew up stateside.
Yeah.
And, reading your standard American floppies. And what got you interested in manga?
The library. So I didn't live close to a local comic book shop. Most of my Western comics came from like either my dad or my older brother saying, "Hey, look, eBay's a thing. This guy's selling a box of 80 comics for $20. Let's get Now you got me mad at myself because I gave away all of my 60s Hulk comics. Dang it. Every time I think of those, I'm mad at myself. All right. So I was reading Western comics, and then like our family would go to like the YMCA and the library, and I just like grab everything there. And like I'm sure that, I read like a Pokemon manga and I didn't know what a manga was. Maybe like I was vaguely aware they came from Japan, but like my waifu from the series From Far Away, that was the first series I read where I was aware like that this is something from another country, and like I have to read it backwards, right? I distinctly remember the first time I was thinking, I have to read this book backwards, was with From Far Away. And it just hit me at such a deep emotional level. Like it impacted me more than Star Wars did, right? And I watched Star Wars when I was 6, and I would like imagine being Darth Vader. And what I think it did for me is I just sort of saw like really clearly how the hero's journey relates to my own life for my own time, where I realized, okay, she's learning not to be an asshole, so I have to learn not to be an asshole, right? So I had like a really great first impression of manga, and it also stood out to me that maybe because of like their history of printmaking, ukiyo-e prints, and maybe they just have like a different visual approach to comic, where obviously they're looking at Western comics as like the starting point for the medium, but then when they look at their own cultural history, like they bring in some different things. They bring in some abstract shapes. They bring in some vertical, obviously their vertical lettering system. So
right.
It's not that hard, I think, to make the jump. Like if you like Western comics, there's a lot of manga you should like. Maybe it's just like, I don't know, like the weeby cutesy faces put people off or something. But don't knock it till you try it, and don't assume that like the most popular genres are what it all is. Like I like goofy shoujo and goofy shonen books; they really appeal to me, but if you're just not jamming with that, go for a horror book or something, or go for a sci-fi book. They have tremendous genre diversity. Manga's been my number one thing. I have dipped into some European, Franco-Belgian comics a little bit, and what has always stood out to me about those is just like the real elegance of the cartoon style. So diversity of reading material is always, I give that a big thumbs up, and it's kind of, I guess I'm kind of experimenting with that because I'm reading through every comic at the library, so I'm discovering a lot of things I might not otherwise pay attention to because I'm forcing myself to try to read them all.
The thing about it is, though, is I don't really think that, like, I think your timeline is wrong, Matt. Honestly, like 100% completely wrong, because there was only about 7 years where the Comics Code Authority held down other genres, and even then it was really only EC Comics that was being shut down, EC Comics and Fawcett, because the Comics Code Authority was less about censorship than it was about corporate espionage, and it was more about DC muscling out its compatriots and having a willing partner on behalf of Archie and Red Circle than it had anything to do with actually thing it. Because as soon as EC Comics stopped being a thing, DC started making horror comics and true crime comics. They weren't published as well, but they're out there. And so for the whole of the 70s, most of the 80s, and of the late 60s was, the superheroes were going on, but at the same time you had House of Secrets, you had House of Mystery, you had Ghosts, you had Charlton coming as a competitor doing their own ghost stories monthly, and you had even Marvel got into the game, having reinvented the superhero in some ways in the 60s, but they still were doing Doctor Strange and the Man Thing and Tales of Suspense, Classics Illustrated, their edition of Classics Illustrated, which was full of horror stories and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
I just think that the fact they were taking part in a superhero universe didn't change the fact that and even in the 70s, when you look at one of the best selling comics that DC had was Warlord, which was an entirely fantasy adventure story. There wasn't a single superhero element in the whole thing. That was and it was just John Carter in the middle of the planet, basically. Except for powers.
I may have not presented the argument well enough, but I still know I'm right.
There's a level at which something is true universally, and there's a level at which something is true about people's assumptions. So I think it's true that there is an assumption that people hear comics, they think superhero, right? Like that. Like, that's even true of like people may not even know the difference. Like they hear comics and they think Batman and Spider-Man, right? And it doesn't even they don't even know like why aren't Batman and Spider-Man owned by the same company, right? Like there's a normie level awareness people have of superhero characters where they may not have ever like transitioned into getting hooked on comics, for example.
Yeah.
Well, and that's because the thing is that the superhero narrative is the narrative of all stories writ small.
Well, you can say that about any genre.
Well, yeah, except you can't. Like fantasy is always writ large. There's no such thing as a small fantasy. Once you get swords and goblins in there, even the stupid D&D cartoon from the 80s was still a huge, epic, sprawling thing. The superhero stories are 8-page stories. I mean, that's they're backups. And some of them are larger than that too, but they still have a simplicity to them. One of my favorite comics from back in the day to read through are the Silver Age Aquaman stories, which were complex relationship narratives told to the level of 7-year-old girls, and it's in the context of a superhero story that would appeal to 8-year-old boys, but it's actually targeted at 7-year-old girls and about being a 20-something. It's about being an adult, but it's written to children. And it's all this stuff. It's all these things that are distilled down. But when it comes to,
can I push back just a little bit before we move too far? This is why I'm right and you're wrong. I'm right because I may have put trying to press the Comics Code thing because I know that gets a rise out of Doug. What I really meant to say was the Comics Code Authority permitted a monoculture to develop where stronger companies were able to dominate the market and decide on behalf of the market what sort of stories were going to become synonymous with selling comics. So they could consolidate.
Because the company that became dominant, Marvel Comics,
yes,
a 2-bit hustler of a company when the Comics Code Authority had power.
Yes, but
they were nothing. They were an absolute nothing.
And they killed off competition.
Fawcett was the biggest name at the time, and they ended up shutting their entire comic wing down because they lost so much money in the lawsuit over Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
They didn't even lose the lawsuit. That was the funny thing. They just spent so much on lawyers, DC just run them into the ground over it. And then DC bought the properties up for a nickel, not literally.
I think you're proving my point, but that's fine.
No, it's that's the thing is like one of the things you had Marvel wasn't when they became dominant, there wasn't a one-shot thing at that point. They were already producing other content. Because they didn't sell as much, and I think that has more to do with the fact that superheroes in a lot of ways are I think they are a distinctly American idea. They're not an exclusively American idea, but they are a distinctly American idea because of the nature of individuality and self-governance that are an intrinsic assumption of the superhero genre. Which is one of the things, I don't know if you heard me go on about what a terrible idea Civil War was for Marvel.
We debated that, which was the debate was me saying, I hate it, but I like parts of it, and then you convincing me not to like parts of it. That was our debate.
Yes, that's true. Because one of the fundamental premises of a superhero universe is that the superheroes have a right to exist and to function as superheroes, whether they have or do not have governmental authority. Because that authority for the defense of others exists within the body politic. And if you are powerful, then you have the right to defend.
That's a very noble, that's a very noble thing to say about superheroes. It's essentially American. It quintessentially tells the American ideal more than anything else. But I think it's more of a happenstance of the consolidation of power.
That's nonsense. That's nonsense. That's like saying America happened to write the Declaration of Independence in English. The foundational culture that spawned America is the same foundational culture that spawned. There's no coincidence there.
You're talking about a country that has as much of the population as the population, like much bigger than Japan, much bigger, like equal to the population of Europe, and yet we only have two dominant companies owning everything else within decades after the Comics Code Authority. It's not a coincidence, and they're all telling the same stories.
It's because you're wrong. That's not that. There were companies in that. There was Charlton. There was Archie.
No, there should. If there was
Archie Comics, Archie Comics moved more units of comic books in the than Marvel, DC, and Image combined.
Yes, but Marvel and DC had an understanding that they were playing the long game, and they successfully taught the market to expect what they were going to do.
As long as Archie exists, your argument is not sound. Archie defeats the argument. What you're looking at is the difference, and all the stuff you're talking about is stuff that came into fruition through the direct market at the expense of other markets.
Which is the product of a truncated, sickly...
But the direct market is not comics. King
in America, it's uniquely American again.
Right, but that's
because two companies
it's not going to be that
control the entire market, which
they don't though.
Never have.
They don't though. I mean, and even if you're looking at like in the 60s, the underground comics movement's gone on. Mad Magazine, which was founded on the ashes of EC Comics, became a dominant force so much that Warner Brothers bought them in the 80s because they were such a huge presence on the magazine stand. And that was all comedy. I mean, like, Marvel ripped off Mad Magazine with their comic Plop in the 70s because they were moving so many units on the newsstand. The comic shop is just... I
love alternative secondary stuff as much as you do, but...
Right. But that's like that. Mad Magazine wasn't alternative in its heyday. It was every bit as much of a market force. It just only had one product.
No, it's fine. It was a vestige of a pre-Comics Code sensibility of edgy, weird, adult humor stuff that was very popular before Comics Code Authority until someone had the bright idea to believe, unlike anywhere else on the planet, to tell companies that comics are for kids.
Well, the companies told themselves.
Well,
that's the thing is these, and that was the thing with the Comics Code Authority is it was all voluntary. That was the other thing about it that you're leaving out there. It was a promise between the primary market, which was the people who were buying comics, and even the situation where you had people like Roy Thomas that started reading comics when he was a child and was writing comics when he was a child, because that's what Roy Thomas did. But even then, it was a situation where he was writing comics that he enjoyed, that he knew 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds would enjoy too.
Yeah. Okay, you're wrong, but it's fine. We should probably wrap it up. I'll let you. This is your show.
Our comics for kids.
Comics are for everyone.
Comics are for everyone, absolutely.
And if only Marvel and DC understood this.
Yeah. Well, and like right now, and that's the situation. And that's the situation we have here. And see, part of what I think you're buying into a false narrative that's been propped up by the direct market and by edgelords who just wanted to draw boobs. And so, because they're denying the historical realities of the situation, because they're giving too much power to people like Frederick Wortham for destroying free speech in a way of defending their own admitted deviance, what you have here is you have a that makes comics for kids that kids can't read. You have comics that make comics for adults, but that are complex enough to hold adult interest.
Yeah. Well, you were kind enough to buy Curie, and you understand what I'm doing, and I'm not drawing.
I do. But
it's a kid's story. So.
Yeah, one of the things one of the things that you have on there though is that
yeah, that's fine.
No. Well, the thing is, I'm thinking, right? Because I'm thinking, like, my problem is I'm always seeing, I see where you're coming from, and that's what gets me in trouble. Is I always see where everyone's coming from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but the part of what I'm saying is you look at like Japanese comics. I don't know a ton about them, so correct me if I'm wrong on here.
I can't wait to correct you when you're wrong about it.
Dude, I love being corrected because I hate being wrong. But one of the things is like they have genres that are content specific, right?
Down to you can expect certain plot points. So like exactly are fantasies that are specifically about a high school student being transported into a fantasy world. Yeah.
If you pick up a comic that's designed for kids, you're not going to see two dudes violating a donkey in it.
No, but you will see some sexual content in kind of like their comics aimed at 13-year-olds. Probably not. Well, I'm trying to think about the little kid stuff. The little kid stuff, there might be like a couple little like butt gags or something. But yeah, they do tend to clean it up for their elementary age school audience. Yeah. Right.
And see, this is the thing that I think that the big two miss on, and I think Image misses on it because Image is all adult. Dark Horse was all adult. Even though like a lot of Dark Horse's comics, well, with their Star Wars stuff's pretty all ages, but with it, I think what people miss is the idea that and what the Comics Code did, and the fact that it was kind of done in exclusion. I can see that a legitimate argument with that, but what it did is it let mom from the suburbs know that she could buy this book for her kid and let him read it on the way home and not have to read it ahead of time, right?
What about the European mom? What about the Brazilian mom? What about the Japanese mom?
Well, the Japanese mom, I would assume, because the genres are done at the thing. If you're getting your 13-year-old shonen, he's not going to be picking up the hentai or whatever because it's in that section. And if those genres are specific. But of course, what we would consider, different cultures have different definitions of what qualifies as pornography, right?
But, yeah, very much so.
I feel like maybe I think Matt may be tapping into like a general American thing where beyond comics, there is like an American sensitivity to content in, but like the 90s craze about like Satanism in all the cartoons, right? Yeah. Like if a bad guy showed up.
When I was growing up reading comics, I knew that if I was going to pick up Superman, I'd be pretty safe to read Superman, right? I'm not going to worry too much about finding Superman, in bed with Lois Lane, even though it was fairly obvious that they were involved in premarital shenanigans. I didn't have to watch it, right? But I also knew if I was going to get Starman, there's a good chance I was going to see Jack Knight's butt, right? So when I was a child, I didn't read Starman because I didn't want that content. Right, I wasn't have the mental discipline to separate those sort of things that I did when I was in my 20s. And so when I was in my 20s, I could see all of this as somebody growing up and but not something that I wanted to get in when I was reading, Robin or reading Young Justice.
Yeah, that's fine.
And those comics were done in such a way that you could expect that even when they stopped for a time, right? Even when they stopped participating in the Comics Code Authority, which they did in 2006, I think is when it was finally turned down from that.
Oh gosh, was it voluntarily? Oh
yeah,
it's had a stranglehold for that long.
It was the last when Marvel bowed out of it. Well, it wasn't a stranglehold. That's the thing is like from the time of the 60s on. From the time of the 60s on. DC, Marvel, Image never paid on. But from the time of the 60s on, they would use or not use the Comics Code marking as they saw fit for stories. And that was one of those things where, because it was like they paid their dues, and then there was somebody whose job it was to, run a random check of comics that had the seal on them, and be like, okay, you're right, this one's sealed, this one gets the seal, this one doesn't get the seal, go back, and then DC for like the Green Lantern scenarios, Speedy's on heroin. Funny drug choice for me, but
well, can I just like, okay, have you heard of young adult fiction? Have you heard of how there's a separate category of this in people's minds, and how
Hunger Games,
you can go to like a specific area of the bookshelf, and you can reasonably expect to get certain kinds of maybe PG-13 content, but probably not R. And none of this needed a voluntary, or whatever we want to call it, comics code. There didn't need to be a seal stamp of approval. We don't need rating systems. All this stuff works very naturally. And when it's left alone, which is what people thankfully have done with young adult fiction, it works. It is able to handle the diversity of content that people actually want from the medium, which happens to be very diverse, much more diverse than majority single genre content, which is what the entire planet, except for United States, demands of comics.
What if an alternate cause of that is an American appetite for superheroes, right?
But then young adult fiction would be superhero specific.
It is, but there's a whole genre of young.
I don't want to read a book about Batman kicking someone's butt, though. I want to see him showing up in his underwear on the outside outfit to beat up a guy, right? Like, I feel like this is a very comic specific thing. But I've made this argument separately, but I think of Superman and Batman almost as Bugs Bunny, Mickey Mouse type characters, or the American melodrama. Like the American melodrama, everything is understood instantly. There's a guy with a black top hat and a mustache. He's the bad guy. There's a big, strong guy with a white cowboy hat. He's the good guy, right?
Well, and actually, I think that's an important thing to look at time frame. You're looking at because what that is that's branding. That's iconography.
Yeah.
And early 20th century iconography was just kind of becoming a thing, right? As far as widespread stuff from 1890 up until the 80s. Well, in fact, earlier today, side note on this, but earlier today, my wife and I were just reminiscing about old jingles that used to sell like bologna and Jell-O and stuff, and they don't have jingles for products anymore, right?
Yeah.
But we can still hear, we can sit here and still sing, burst into song. The Oscar Mayer was, my bologna has a first name, right? Because it's just ingrained in that, because that was that part of iconography, and that part of that cell was just part of our growing up. And they don't really do that so much anymore, but because the media's changed a little bit, and we have more access to that kind of stuff, I think. Sorry on the chat, put this up there.
That's an interesting gay authority. Yeah.
But yeah, I think one of the things you have here is that the Comics Code Authority was generated at the same time as the Better Business Bureau, right? As it came out of the whole. I mean, at the same time as you have all the Rotary clubs and all of those sort of things.
You can blame it. It's symptomatic of a greater disease.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I wouldn't call it a disease. I just call it iconography. That they're working at a specific thing, just like every other the blue ribbon of quality or whatever, that people wanted to have something to say. Here is something where you can trust.
So something that's kind of like behind this was Scott McCloud, right? Because I heard you mention him earlier. Because Scott McCloud's basically the one who laid out the thesis that the comics industry is dying because of basically of a superhero monopoly, right? And my thing about Scott McCloud is I love him and I hate him, and I can never decide which it is. I guess that's part of what I like about it, is I'm always debating with him when I read it. But to me, it seems like Scott McCloud kind of predicted the fall of modern comics. And what's interesting is he was talking about things that are bigger and broader than like the SJW problem. I think the SJW problem is a contributing factor, but it's maybe too narrow. Like there are too many other factors at play.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also feel like Scott McCloud also kind of like had like a weird, I don't know, like a weird embarrassment about superhero comics, and he was desperate to prove that comics could be smart, and they weren't just Batman. And I feel like that kind of like informs his argument, where he really wants you to know that comics are serious and for smart people, right? And I guess that's the hate part of my issue with Scott McCloud. I always my attitude towards children's literature is children's literature could be the smartest thing I ever read in my life, right? So maybe like okay. Yeah,
and I'm reflected of that quote from I believe it was C.S. Lewis, who said, when I was a young man, I never read fairy tales because I was afraid of not seeming mature. And now that I'm mature, I can read fairy tales because I really understand them.
Yeah,
I honestly believe that superhero comics specifically are the American mythology, in everything that entails.
No, that's become true.
I think it was to begin with. I think that's why Superman dressed like a wrestler with a cape suddenly became a national phenomenon within a year. Because there were costume heroes before then, but what did it take? It looks because like you have the Shadow, you have the Spider, you have Zorro. They're all part of the pulps, but nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing became a landslide until the two Jewish boys from Cincinnati. Or Cleveland, sorry. Put an Englishman from space in a wrestler's costume, and when that happened, suddenly it became something tremendous, and it exploded. And I think it's because it speaks to the mythic backdrop of American individualism, and not every character does that in the same way.
Katniss Everdeen. Sorry. I love what you're saying. I wish I lived in your world, but young adult fiction will always, the American young adult fiction market will always be a thorn in your side. And
I feel like
that's where it should be.
See, I think that's because you're too narrowly defining a superhero. There's the things Katniss is capable of doing, humans aren't. The things John McClane are doing, humans can't. We tell the only difference between tell
that to Cape Stories. Tell that to Cape Stories.
The only thing that the only difference between our other myths and superheroes is that superheroes wear their labels, that's really it. Now that doesn't mean other people don't tell bad superhero stories, just like there aren't stupid takes on myths, but but conceptually, I don't see any difference between stories of Hercules and stories of the Green Hornet.
So Matt, let me get at something. All right. So this is kind of a meta debate about like what is the purpose or value of the superhero story. So Matt,
yes.
As I understand it, one of your problems with kind of like the Comics Code of Authority and the Marvel and DC dominance is you think that this has created a particularly American appetite for just this type of story to the exclusion of other genres. And if you get outside of the American market, you see, I don't know, more genre diversity in the Franco-Belgian market and the Japanese market, right?
There is no comics market outside of the American market, and this includes Canada and Mexico, that is not highly diverse and just as diverse as the novel market or TV or movies or any other market you care to pick.
But they might have a popular format still. Like the closest I can think of that's an equivalent in the Japanese market is like the Shonen Jump comic. It's a fairly close parallel to the Marvel DC superhero comic in the context of their culture, where they're not interested in the same underwear on the outside and capes kind of things we are, but there are like really clear discernible patterns in a Shonen Jump comic, targeting it at a 13-year-old boy, and those are almost all the highest spending comics, right? Or highest selling comics. So I don't know. Mm-hmm. I guess kind of like my attitude about superheroes is when I got sick of superheroes, I started reading manga, and so now I'm not like mad about superheroes anymore, because if I ever get sick of superheroes, I can like read there's some, like, are you worried that it's harder for a indie artist or a, I don't know, like a non-superhero artist to succeed specifically in America because of the popularity of the superhero comic in America?
That could be a chip on my shoulder, honestly.
Well, then I just have to point out to 30 years of Dark Horse never doing superhero comics. I mean that was their whole market. And Scholastic, which dominates the youth market, doesn't do superhero comics hardly either, except for like Captain Underpants, which doesn't really count. I wouldn't think. I can't get it. But I'm also not a 8-year-old boy, and I haven't been for a very, very long time, so I don't find it funny.
No, I know that my argument isn't white and yours isn't black. I understand that there's gradients here, but it's heavily weighted. My argument is actually that it's grossly and disproportionately weighted towards one market because the natural ecosystem that is global died out here. And to some extent is coming there's always been a people on the edges telling different types of stories, and it's coming back ever since the internet age and webcomics and stuff like this. People and finding manga, people have found that you can tell, like, oh wow, you really can tell every kind of story with.
Well, that's part of the thing is I think that you're combining. You're confusing the comic shop from the market because those aren't the same thing.
Well, the comic shop is a Marvel DC creation.
All right, so
but the comic shop is as an exclusive variance of the market. Didn't exist until 2012. Still on newsstands, and those comics weren't all superhero comics
because they thought that it was profitable to do whatever DC and Marvel told them. Because they have a stranglehold.
After we move past the newsstand distribution thing, right? Like there aren't like comic shops don't have like 30 horror titles and 30 Western titles and 30 romance titles anymore. There's a noticeable like high amount of superhero content, right? And what I kind of understand Matt C to be doing is like you like yourself some superhero comics, right? And I like some superhero.
I thought Sean Gordon Murphy's White Knight was really great.
But I will just have times where I don't want superheroes anymore, and like the local comic shop, the American local comic shop, feels like I mostly have to go there for superhero books, and maybe I can find a few cool indie books, right? So I don't know if I would blame Marvel and DC for this. Maybe you could say like the American appetite for superheroes kind of parallels like the American appetite for movies or like Transformers movies, right? Like there's a level at which I love Star Wars, but there's also a level at which someone can obsess about Star Wars so much that Star Wars is basically the only thing they know about. Or Harry Potter. I love Harry Potter, but if you obsess about Harry Potter to the thing where Harry Potter is the only thing you know about, it's kind of like you as the consumer are cutting yourself off from like the diversity of literature and all other kinds of stories, right? If you only consume one consumer meme here, if you only consume one type of thing.
Well, and if there's predominantly two companies and they're both making the same they're making Harry Potter and Barry Blotter. You're gonna.
But I feel like
Barry Blotter. That's the story of a young legal assistant who's been called on a journey, right? Is that?
No, it's basically Harry Potter, but it's
I'm just.
It's the exact same story, though.
And that's actually one of the things that's an interesting like counterpoint to your argument too. While DC and Marvel did have market dominance, when you look at Vertigo, which was almost entirely not superhero,
none of these secondary companies you're naming.
No, Vertigo was a DC imprint. DC was printing Vertigo, and they were selling hundreds of thousands of books a month. That none of them were superhero comics. Yeah,
but none of them approach the popularity a lot of these and the market dynamism that companies.
Here's an interesting little side note though. Part of the reason for that was that Vertigo was sold, with the exception of Sandman, which Sandman was wildly popular amongst people of all ages. But the other Vertigo books were almost all, gritty and naked, because they were all marketed toward adults, and I would agree that having the metal in the chat says I go to my comic shop to read Invader Zim. Well, there you go.
All right.
But yeah,
he broke free from the superhero conditioning.
He gets his superhero comics online and goes to the shop and invaders him.
They're putting chemicals in the water and making us all love superheroes.
Maybe I can convince you another day.
I do, and we have actually been at this for a long time. But I have to agree. I think Marmaduke, I think you're actually onto something, that there is a distinctly American appetite for superheroes, and I think it has to do with our cultural mythology. And I don't think it's nefarious market forces. I think it is actually something about America, and I don't think it's exclusively American, because Americanized societies also love superheroes. Those people that share those values in those countries, which is why, like, My Hero Academia, One Punch Man,
which is Japan kind of talking to us, right? Those are Japanese artists looking at the Western comic and kind of talking to us as Westerners.
And I haven't read a ton of One Punch Man, but the stuff that I have read really seems to be Japan saying, guys, you're screwing it up. This is how you do it. If you could just stop being stupid, this is what you're supposed to be doing.
And if you get beyond like there are only like a small handful of like manga that take on the Western superhero. I feel like once you get out of it, it's really interesting. To me, it's just fascinating reading both, because there are so many strong parallels, but there are also you start picking up like really obvious like cultural Japanese themes that they clearly love that just seem a little like foreign or a bit unusual to us. Like we have an idea of competitiveness here, but I don't know if we have like a romantic ideal of the rival as like this big thing in a young man's life, where the young man's rival is what
we did. That was beat out of us in the 60s. Culturally, that was beaten out of us in the 60s. The idea of rivalry being a potentially good thing.
And now they're taking it out of the English subtitles. This is ticking me off. It's little things. Like I think we were talking about My Hero Academia earlier. In the Japanese, he's explaining how he's been essentially emotionally abused by Bakugo his whole life. And Ochako's way of understanding this is a fate. She calls it a fated rivalry between men. And then they take out the gender aspect of that. But the whole point of it is that Deku is being beaten down and humiliated by another boy. And for him to feel like a man, he has to face his demon and face that other man, right? Like men don't have a relationship like that with a woman. So you can't neuter that in the English translation unless you find that uncomfortable or something. So, Anime Gate!
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. There you go.
I need to check out My Hero Academia.
Well, you know what? Actually, and what I'd love to do. You know what I'd love to do, guys. We've talked about it. I have it. It's pretty frequently available. What about getting together in February and doing a roundtable about that? What would you guys say?
That sounds like fun.
Yeah, doesn't it? And you can yell at me more about how corrupt American heroes are.
It's not the hero's fault. Katniss Everdeen. Your argument is invalid.
Yeah, Katniss is just a budget level Green Arrow.
Oh my gosh! But get out of here. Get outside of America. I'm sorry.
I don't think there's anything more American than the Hunger Games. It's the dark.
Yeah.
It's everything that could be wrong with America is the Hunger Games.
It's the libertarian book that every anti-libertarian read and thought they understood.
So.
Oh, well said.
Ooh. Okay.
It's spicy.
Well, guys, we are going to go ahead and kill it.
All right.
The stream. I do want to take a couple moments for those of you guys in the chat. I believe I put links in the chat for stuff. I mean, the description, although I did not realize that Kyrie is still in demand. So I'm going to edit that so people can still get their hands on 2 books, which are awesome, and you should the first chapter, which are awesome, and you should read them next week.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just leaving the store open. I'm not signing them anymore. But yeah, why close it until you're ready to do the next thing? And I'm not ready yet. So.
As long as you've got enough books to sell, that's the real issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, and the next set of books will be printed in America.
Oh yeah, it's gonna have to be America. I may have to.
Lesson learned.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
All my talk about internationalism. I learned that tariffs are a big positive dissuader.
Well, and it's like one of those things you got to look at too, because it's just like you got to respect Tenaple for going with Jostens. They've got a 100 years of experience on it, plus they're like 2 towns down, so we can actually drive up to the factory and pick them up.
I love that. Yeah, the localism. Like, how much more American can you get than Jostens?
I don't think you can, other than Superman. But
that's fair. That's fair. It's your show.
But yeah, the other thing, of course, keep an eye out on for Jane Smith, Wannabe Gladiator. Very excited.
Yeah.
That one, and it is an awesome visual stuff there. And if you follow me or I Yield Comics on Twitter, look forward to tomorrow. I'll be making a set of announcements for upcoming projects.
Exciting.
That I am working on, and hopefully have some fun stuff to show y'all. And of course, you can always support what we do on Patreon, and the proceeds of that go amongst our partners. So, and to build the future. So there you go. Before I go to, Star brought up that Christopher Tolkien, the literary heir to J.R.R. Tolkien, executor of his literary estate, passed away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that was, I did not want to talk about that in the middle of the stream and then go back to talking about funny books.
Yeah.
So I want to go and end with thanks for all of the brilliance. And I think he did his dad proud. So Tolkien's works cemented the nature of hero stories for the modern era. And I don't think that as I think important as I do believe the superhero stories are important, but they're important in the same way that training wheels are important. It's they're a beginning to greater things, and I think they need to be preserved because of that. But greater things are still greater, and we should acknowledge that as well. So, so the world will be a little less bright because of that. I think, honestly, but we'll always have the work they did. So.
Yeah.
Okay, with that somewhat somber tone, thanks for tuning in, those of you who stuck around, and for those of you catching on the replay, hope it was fun. And have a good one, guys.
Love you. Catch you later.
See y'all.